folks, Joel Brass here with the second in the series of videos on the topic of relationships, the work of love. As some of you may know, the first in the series was called Your Selection Process. And this one, I want to focus on something that hopefully all of us have experienced in our lives and relish, and that is the state of falling in love. I have been a relationship therapist for 30 some years now, and I've seen just about everything imaginable that happens to couples, from the excitement and thrill of meeting someone new in this state, this magical, mystical state that I'm about to talk about today called falling in love, all the way to, of course, the sad, painful, and often tragic demise of a relationship, and the very mixed feelings that many of us have about looking for love after something like that happens to us. So this series will loosely parallel everything that does happen for a couple. And I hope to go through every imaginable question, issue, and stage that we go through, ideally to come out with a healthy, soulful, and satisfying lifelong relationship. But let's look at falling in love today because, as I said, hopefully all of you listening have sampled this, and you know what a glorious, almost transportative experience it is, because it takes us into the magic of all that love can be and life can be. So in falling in love, as you probably know, we experience excitement, we experience passion, we experience novelty, we experience looking into the eyes of our beloved, and they are so perfect and so gorgeous as they are that we can't even imagine there will be any difficulties or issues down the road. Because they just shine so gloriously at the beginning. Falling in love is an important, necessary component of a lifelong relationship. You really do have to know if there is a chemistry between the two of you, if there are fireworks, and if there are all kinds of other factors that match up, like values and visions for your life. But falling in love is in fact temporary, and with all of the couples that I've ever worked with, I've never seen a state of falling in love with all of its wonder and all of its fullness last more than 2 years. It is by its nature temporary. And though we may think that we need do nothing from the point of finding our magical other, sooner or later we realize that a love that is based on the romantic and the sexual has to graduate at some point to a love that is based on the spiritual and emotional base for two people to stay together, that infuses the sexual and the romantic all the days of that couple's lives. But falling in love is that initial state where everything is just perfect, and you can't believe that someone so gorgeous, so godly, is choosing you to be with and sees you in exactly that same way. So a way to describe falling in love is, imagine that you like to run. You've never run competitively, you've never run in a kind of real challenging way, but you like to run, and you walk by a stadium that has a track with Canadian Olympic sprinters running on that track. And you approach them and say, you know, I think I'm pretty good at this kind of thing. I enjoy running. Do you have a free lane? And they say, yeah, we actually do. You can line up at the starter's block right beside us and see how you do. And you get into the starter's block, the gun goes off, and you run your race. And you know what? You run a time that's quite impressive. That's kind of a bit like what falling in love is. But here's the rub. You never run that time ever again. And the Canadian Olympic athlete runs their race to get faster each and every time they run. So they get faster, they get sharper, they get more efficient, they shave off milliseconds every single time they run. But falling in love is the equivalent of running a decent time once, but actually never having trained for the race, never going into the incredible involvement that a full-time commitment to that kind of competitive sport requires, and sooner or later tapering off because we haven't developed the skill set that we need to ever grow in that particular undertaking. So falling in love is much like that, and that is why sooner or later, even though you know, and this is some of the beauty of falling in love, you have glimpsed the perfection of another. You have glimpsed how beautiful, how perfect, how innocent, how gorgeous they are. But the challenge is, of course, to see them that way, to relate to them that way long after you have been infused by the sexual and romantic component that gets you started. So falling in love can be spoken about as glimpsing the perfection of another, and that part is very useful to keep in front of you, but not having the skill set or the capabilities to really move to another stage when falling in love ends, because it ultimately does end. And then, of course, you are no longer carried by a sex that is frequent and exciting and effusive. You start to see some warts or shortcomings or difficulties in the relationship, and the challenges, of course, begin with a whole other stage of relationship that I will call the work of love. And very few couples actually progress to and through the work of love. The work of love, you could say, begins when the stage of falling in love ends. So just to conclude this section on falling in love, it is a magical carpet ride. In it, one or both people believe that love is all you need, and love will see us through such that we can go off into an unlimited and easy, comfortable future. But falling in love is kind of ultimately just the tease or the glimpse into what could be, but you haven't worked for it. And again, in this next stage where we start to look at what work is involved, love is very, very much appropriately compared to a garden. And for you gardeners out there, it is so delightful and fertile and colorful, but you have to stay on top of it constantly. It's kind of like a discipline where there's no hovering. And if you take time off of your gardening, there'll be a lot more that awaits you when you return to putting it back into shape. So next time I will talk to you more about the work of love. And actually one more thing that will come into play, and that's In our selection process, and even in that time where we are falling head over heels in love, we are run unconsciously by something that our biological eyes don't see, and our heart doesn't register in that period that is just so oceanic in its happiness and contentment. And that is something called a love code. And we'll be looking next at our love codes, and that is an unconscious pattern or set of restrictions that are going to even turn something as magical and as unlimited as falling in love into something that is much more laborious and over time can just become a trickle. So thanks for listening, and come back soon to further installments of Relationships, the Work of Love.